I'm Kevin Cirilli. It's time for the Daily Debrief. Let's get right to it. House Speaker Mike Johnson says that he thinks he can get a deal with Democrats before Christmas. Lawmakers are negotiating whether to send more money to Ukraine and Israel, but Johnson and Republicans want money for border security too.
There's some other items in the supplemental package. I think all that will come together in the coming days. We have a sense of urgency about this, and there are deadlines on it as well. So I'm confident and optimistic that we'll be able to get that done, get it over the line.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wants a vote in the Senate as early as next week. Secretary of State Tony Blinken met with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg overseas and reaffirmed U.S. support for Ukraine.
We will be strongly reaffirming our support for Ukraine as it continues to face Russia's war of aggression.
Now Blinken is heading back to Israel for the third time since the Israel-Hamas war began. This as the ceasefire has been extended for 2 more days. Israel says the ceasefire will continue only if Hamas releases 10 hostages per day. Al Jazeera is reporting that 17 of the released Palestinian prisoners so far are children. And President Biden is blaming big business for rising inflation.
But we made progress, but we have more work to do. Let me be clear. To any corporation that's not brought their prices back down, even as inflation has come down, even as supply chains have been rebuilt, it's time to stop the price gouging.
All right, let's look at the receipts from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Before the pandemic and since the pandemic, rent up 20%, groceries up 25%, your restaurant tab up 24%, the electric bill up 25%. And Bloomberg found that it now costs $119.27 for a family to buy the same stuff that before the pandemic cost $100. Former President Donald Trump remains the dominant frontrunner for the Republican nomination, but former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley has now eclipsed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in the race for second place. And it was a political homecoming for Haley, whose rally in the Palmetto State was standing room only before a crowd of 2,500 people. Speaker Johnson is proving that he can raise cash, while one of his caucus members could soon be expelled from Congress. The Hill's Mychael Schnell is here with more on today's big headlines. Mychael, thanks for joining us. All right, we're a ways away from January, which is when Speaker Johnson has to get a deal to keep the government open. But he's spending November and the upcoming weeks raising big bucks while he's brokering a deal. What's going on?
Yeah, well, look, Kevin, this was one of the main concerns about Mike Johnson taking the speaker's gavel and becoming the top lawmaker in the Republican conference, was that his fundraising prowess just wasn't exactly there. You talk about his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy. He's one of the most prolific fundraisers in the Republican conference, if not the most prolific fundraiser. So the general consensus was he had some big shoes to fill. I'll tell you what, Kevin, he's already working to fill those shoes. Just yesterday, he was down in Florida for a fundraiser. He raked in $1.4 million, a drop in the bucket to what Kevin McCarthy would rake in, but it's definitely a start.
Definitely, and to your point, McCarthy could raise big bucks, but he couldn't keep the gavel. Switching gears now to the Santos saga. Here we go again, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, she posted on X defending George Santos. She writes, quote, that the GOP is on the verge of expelling a not yet convicted Republican member. And then you've got Congressman Clay Higgins. He sent a letter out to all of the Republican caucus, and he says that the House Ethics Committee, quote, indicates a level of public character assassination that I have not witnessed through 4 terms of congressional service, end quote. Mychael, is this going to be enough to keep support for Santos so that he doesn't get kicked out of Congress, or is he on his way out?
I mean, look, 2/3 majority is a high bar to clear in terms of expelling George Santos. I'll put it like this, Kevin. Right now, the odds of George Santos being expelled from Congress are the highest they have been this whole entire year, including the 2 previous pushes to expel him from Congress. A number of Democrats and Republicans who backed George Santos in the past have since said they now think that he should be ousted after reading that ethics report, which, I'll just give you some top lines. He used campaign funds on Botox, at Hermes, on trips to Atlantic City, to Vegas, on subscriptions to the platform OnlyFans. So a lot of folks are turning on George Santos now. Whether or not it'll be enough, it looks like very well can be. There's likely going to be a vote on his ouster this week, so we'll just have to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, definitely. And I heard there's a big balloon of George Santos flying over the Capitol today, put out by the left group MoveOn.org. So, it's up in the sky now too, Mychael. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Secretary of State Tony Blinken has just told NATO that the U.S. will continue to show full support for Ukraine in the war against Russia. The Hill's Alex Gangitano joins me now to dig a little deeper on the debrief. Do Republicans agree with Blinken?
It's a good question. We have seen for months that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has agreed with sending more funds to Ukraine, has agreed that the U.S. should be the global leader on supporting Ukraine. But he's lately left a lot to the decision of new Speaker Mike Johnson and to House Republicans of how they want to proceed with this funding request. The White House, of course, the president has hung his hat on this being a legacy item for him of being the global leader on supporting Ukraine. And they've been asking Congress for more funding for the country for multiple rounds of government funding for now and haven't been able to get it. They're at the point that they've said this is urgent. And I think McConnell's at the point that he's in this really tough spot of how do I get support from my colleagues to keep funding Ukraine? I've been championing this funding for Ukraine among Republicans in Congress for months now, but also not step on House Republicans' toes and not make this a failure if this can't go through, especially if it's tied to
Alex,
funding
on the
for
right,
Israel,
you've got the
border.
The right flank is advocating for more transparency on Ukraine funding, and the left flank is urging Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer to have more conditions placed on aid to Israel. What's going on with the left flank?
Yeah, that's right. So the left flank is this kind of mix of Republicans of, are we giving too much support for Israel and backing their war against Hamas? Should we be 100% supporting Israel here? Well, thousands of Palestinians and Gaza civilians are dying because of this war. And so they're fighting between, moderate and progressive Democrats on that side about aid to Israel. Well, Republicans are arguing about aid to Ukraine. And at the end of the day, the White House wants to see a package that includes Ukraine, Israel, border, Indo-Pacific, and all these funding requests in one pile.
All right, last question for you. Senator Tuberville, he's the one that's holding up all of the military nominations in the upper chamber. He's a Republican. Are Republicans now going to break through his chokehold of the military nominations?
This is the closest they've gotten in a long time to breaking this. Senator Schumer has now passed this resolution that would allow for promotions, or the Rules Committee has passed it that would allow for these promotions to be brought to the floor and voted on at the same time. And Schumer has said that he plans to bring it to the floor. That would give some Republican colleagues a chance to break this cycle, which is almost a year-long holdup on nearly 400 military promotions. So we'll see if Republicans get on board with Democrats to end this once and for all.
It's Senator Joni Ernst. She's the one to watch, the Republican from Iowa, and a veteran for that matter as well. All right, Alex Gangitano, thank you so much for breaking down the geopolitics happening in Congress. And be sure to tune in for the final GOP debate of the year on America's fastest growing cable news network, News Nation. SiriusXM's Megyn Kelly, News Nation's Elizabeth Vargas, and the Washington Free Beacon's Eliana Johnson. They're set to moderate the primetime event live from the University of Alabama. This as the candidates make their case to America on the only network for all America. The News Nation Republican primary debate, live December 6th at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. And that's it for today's Daily Debrief. I'm Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.